Welcome back to another episode of Impossible Equals Impossible. This is the final episode of 2023. What a magical or memorable year, really, this has been. And when I co created this live show originally, a little over 9 months ago, it was really to inspire other people to chase their potential instead of accepting their reality and really sharing the whole story, right? Because a lot of times when we see people on social media, especially people who have done incredible things, we tend to only see the highlight reels. And one of the things that I learned through both my story and a lot of the communities that I've been a part of over these past 3 years is this idea that before everybody did got to that point of like extreme success, right? You had to overcome the situations that we all thought were impossible per se. And the guest that I have tonight, we're closing it out on top. He's been an absolutely incredible mentor and friend, probably one of the greatest leaders, relationship builders, networkers that I know. And I'm really excited for this episode because he's a lot like me in the sense that we don't like to talk about ourselves. And I get to give him the gift of talking about all the incredible things that he's done, he's experienced, he's, given people really throughout his life. And sometimes, like, you need to have those, we need to be like honored, right? Like you need, it's so nice to have people acknowledge the incredible things that you've done. And Tanya and Moose, so good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, but before I introduce or I read the bio for the guest, I want to share with you a really powerful story. And it was the first conversation that we ever had. The long story behind how I got introduced to the Outlier Project was I had met somebody at a LinkedIn audio event, right? A lot of you have known that I've done probably spoken, hosted, or attended 700 to 800 of them over the past year. I met somebody at a LinkedIn audio event. We had a conversation. We made kind of an instant connection. I introduced him to a handful of people, and he tells me, hey, he's like, you need to be a part of this community. And the funny story behind it as well is that one of my best friends is actually a part of it as well. And when I got the invite, I had asked her about it. And she said, oh, it's funny. I was going to bring you into the community as well. Well, when I had a conversation with the guest that I'm about to bring up shortly, it was probably one of the greatest conversations of my life. It was everything that we had talked about was where I was currently headed. He was kind of already there. And a lot of you I've shared before, I grew up without a dad for most of my life. My dad was a drug addict who passed away when I was 17. So, and a lot of my mentors and in a lot of these professional communities, being a male and being somebody in your 20s are like outliers, right? So it's fitting that I joined a community called the Outlier Project. But he's been the golden connection for me this year, a true gift. And there's no better person that I would want to close out 2023 with than Scott Macgregor. So before I bring him up, I'm going to tell you a bit about him. I also just want to give this disclosure. LinkedIn Live has been very glitchy. So if you want to comment live and have it show up, you you need to make sure that you're on a computer, because there's been a glitch on mobile where the comments don't show up. So that's the one thing I want to say. And with no further ado, my guest tonight is Scott Macgregor. He's become an incredible friend and mentor to me, and he's the founder and CEO of Something New LLC and the Outlier Project. He's a four-time author of the Standing O series and a record 8 consecutive American Business Award winner for innovation. Giving back is at the core of Scott's values as he sits on numerous business advisory boards, nonprofits, and foundations, and is one of the greatest leaders I know and has won numerous awards throughout his professional career. He's also a master connector and networker who values people over everything and has built relationships with some of the most incredible humans all over the world. But it wasn't always this way, though, as Scott grew up poor in an affluent town in Connecticut where sports, discipline, and building relationships were the catalyst to living an extraordinary life. And I'll tell you, you know, somebody's really extraordinary when I changed the banner on this show that's for the longest time said, "Be more afraid of being nothing than being something." Tonight, it's the phrase that we have in our community, the Outlier Project, of anyone can be ordinary, but we all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. And with no further ado, I bring to you the legend, Mr. Scott Macgregor. Scott.
Paul, man, I appreciate that. I'm not used to being the cleanup hitter. I'm typically the leadoff hitter, but this is a special night, and I really appreciate you.
Yeah, Scott, thank you so much for being here. You know, you've been an incredible gift to my life. We've probably known each other for maybe a little over 8 months, but I know instantly we've had conversations. You've really been there for me at one of the low points this year, and I've learned so much from you, not only about leadership and all these incredible things that we read on your bio, but really just character. I think the thing that blew me away the most is that the level of people that you've introduced to us this year on the Outlier Project and how they talk about you told me pretty much everything that I needed to know, like really early on. And it's just so incredible to have you here tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. Having great friends, you included, is one of life's greatest blessings. And the fact that I get to share an evening with you or share my friends, with our community is really fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So it makes life a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I know we talked about like so many things there, but I want to know, like, so many times, right? We talked about it kind of in the pre-live. When people look at a lot of the incredible successes that you've had, they think it's kind of always that way. But your life has been an extraordinary journey. Tell us kind of a little more about, well, who is Scott Macgregor ultimately, but also how did your childhood and kind of, I guess you would say, young adulthood really shape kind of who you've become as a person?
Yeah, I think, growing up, not having a lot of financial means when everybody around me did, was an interesting way to grow up. I wouldn't change it. I think it was a great way to grow up. It made me extremely motivated. It made me very curious. And it was interesting. I was telling somebody earlier today that later on in life, I became the chairman of the board for an organization called Elevate New York, which is a curriculum embedded in the South Bronx. And I think what struck me in working with these kids in the South Bronx is they don't really know that they're economically disadvantaged because they're in a community that is all kind of in the same boat. It was a little different for me, and I'm not comparing my situation to the kids in the South Bronx, but it was very apparent that we really didn't have the same financial means, and it made me work really hard, particularly school and sports. And I just worked my ass off. And I think sports leveled the playing field. It also gave me a level of confidence that I don't know I would have gotten just by getting good grades in school. So, when you're younger, being a decent athlete plays a big role in your self-confidence. So, that's how it began. And as I said, I really wouldn't change it, to be honest, Paul.
Yeah, that's incredible. And tell me a little more about how sports really kind of leveled the playing field for you. Was it because you were able to control kind of your output and work ethic, and that was one of the main things that really mattered versus like being able to afford things or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I felt different because we didn't have the things that, everybody else had. We didn't go on vacations. We didn't go to restaurants. Our house was, not like the houses that my friends lived in. And, sports, because I worked really, really hard. And it was just a passion of mine. I think it gave people had a decent amount of respect uh, for, I guess, my athletic ability. Um, so you tend to, be somebody that people want to hang around with, and that's what I mean by it leveled the playing field. So I felt lesser than economically, but it really didn't matter because I kind of over indexed in another area.
Mm.
It wasn't because I'm like some great athlete. I mean, it really was just a tenacious work ethic at a very, very early age.
Yeah, for sure. And I know one of the things that you and I talked about a lot, because I've been in the adult world since I was 16, is that a lot of times, a lot of people look at it as kind of a disadvantage, right? Because you're like, oh, shoot, you're in this position. Whereas for me, I kind of flipped the script. I remember one of the most memorable things from our conversation, and I know a lot of people look at me crazy when I say that adversity is a gift, because one of the things that I knew from my experience was that people would always kind of put you in this box of what they thought that you would do, right? They thought that it was like, oh, he's just another typical teenager, right? You're predictable, all these type of things. But being able to surprise people, I feel like that's one of the things that a lot of people don't really realize, is that when you're kind of the odd one, you have so much potential to be unpredictable and surprise people. And it sounds like from that perspective, from that aspect, you were able to really kind of create your own path type of thing.
Yeah, I guess I did. I mean, I was kind of an outlier from day
Mm.
one.
Yeah.
When my dad owned a gas station, and I would go to work when I was 10 years old. So it was a full service gas station. So
Wow.
you just imagine this little 10-year-old kid running out to your car, and this is back in the day when we would check the pressure in the tires, we would check the oil. And so here's a 10-year-old kid saying pop your hood and pumping your gas and checking. It's just, my dad would be arrested today for doing that. But um you know I was clearly different. My friends were not working when they were 10 years old. um it just it made me different, I think, from day one, and gave
Yeah.
me uh tremendous work ethic. And I give my dad a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to say hello. We have some of our outlier friends that popped up. Shannon, so good to see you. Thank you for being here. Lindsay, so good to see you. Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. Scott is the perfect guest to end 2023 Dr. News here. James, so good to see you. Aloha, James. You're from Maui. I was born and raised on Oahu, so that's
James is a Yale legend. He was a phenomenal tight end at Yale University. And James and I go way back. Good
that
to
is
see him.
so that is so cool. Scott, I'm curious. I had read that you had an incredible, obviously, like you went to college, and then after that you had an incredible career at, I believe it was Pitney Bowes, where you were like the youngest. I think it was at 29 or something. You were like one of the top youngest people. How how did that kind of happen? Like, what was after you had, because I know you had mentioned to me before that you were a state champion, right, in football,
Mhm.
and how did you kind of end up finding sales as a career?
Uh, I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. I knew I wasn't going to be a lawyer. I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. Sales seemed like something that I could do and enjoy, even though I'm not really an extrovert. I'm not an introvert either. I'm kind of like a what they call an ambivert.
Right.
Um, I just I thought I'd be good at it. Um, I took classes in college to really prepare me for a career in sales. So I took a lot of communications courses, a lot of public speaking, writing skills, things like that, that I tended to do fairly well in. Um, and so when I got in sales, I think what I loved about sales is it was very similar to sports. There was a score that was being kept. You were being measured. It was very, very obvious if you were winning or losing. And more than anything, I felt like I could really control my destiny because the harder I worked, the more disciplined I was, the more resilient I was, the better I did. And I realized that all those traits that I had learned when I was a kid were now paying off for me professionally, because honestly, being great at sales, you know, the key characteristics are hard work, discipline, and resiliency. Um, you have to have communication skills, you have to have empathy, you've got to be a good listener. But you can go very, very far by just being a really hard worker, being disciplined, and having resiliency. So it was, I think, a really good fit for me, and I did well, and achieved some pretty cool things.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because one of the things that I'm learning more and more is that sales, business, however you really want to label it, it's all really kind of a people game, right? And it's communicating with people, it's having conversations, it's listening, it's asking great questions, and a lot of these type of things, and that's really awesome. I I'm curious for you, right? Because now obviously you're a CEO and founder of multiple various companies. You serial entrepreneur. You sit on numerous boards and nonprofits and all these type of things. How did a lot of that really kind of start? Right. I think especially you and I are on LinkedIn mainly. You see a lot of people who have kind of been in the corporate space for years and years and years and years. And it seems like for you, you had wanted something different. And I'm kind of curious, like, what was it for you that made you want to kind of become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think even though I did well in a corporate setting, Fortune 500 company, and then a startup that I helped to build over a long period of time, I'm really wired to be an entrepreneur. I'm a little bit of a control freak. I want to do things my way. I don't like being told what to do. Um, I'm pretty creative, so I want to unleash that creativity. And I was able to do a lot of that at the startup that I worked for. Um, but you can never do it fully when it's not
Yeah.
your company. Um, so for me, entrepreneurship was definitely the right path. I don't regret working in a corporate environment because I learned a ton. I definitely have my wife, Meg, to thank. I would have probably not become an entrepreneur if it weren't for her, only because I felt like it seemed irresponsible with
Mm.
two kids to walk away from a pretty lucrative job
Hmm.
to start my own thing, which a lot of people think is risky. It just so I sat on a business plan that I had put together for a decade, and
Wow.
finally my wife Meg was like, "Listen, you got to do this. Like, go for it. It's what you think about in your spare time. It's what you're passionate about. And luckily, because of her support, I was able to make that move and do it and kind of not look back.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's I'm curious on your perspective, but I feel like a lot of people have this kind of misconception today where it's like people are like just kind of born entrepreneurs, right? I feel like a lot of us who are entrepreneurs are because we experienced the corporate setting and we saw like it just wasn't for us, right? Kind of like how you were saying, you had all the successes, but it didn't really kind of set your soul on fire. Like you weren't doing stuff that you actually love to do because you didn't really have control over a lot of it. And you had said something earlier about being able to kind of control your own destiny, and I feel like that's what entrepreneurship has kind of been for me, right? I remember being in the corporate spaces where like you were capped out in a lot of roles, right? They give you a salary and most times they make you do extra stuff, stay later, all these type of things, but you have like that cap. And I can tell from this conversation, but also the conversations that I had for you, that you're one of those people that there was no ceiling for you, right? Like there's just the floor, and that's really awesome. And I know that you've talked a lot about how incredible Meg is, and I haven't met Meg yet, but I can't wait to meet her at when we go on our expedition to Nicaragua. Talk about like one, I'm curious, like how did you guys kind of really meet, but also like what do you think has been probably one of the most impactful things that she's either taught you or kind of done that has really molded who you are today?
Meg is just incredibly authentic. She is who she is unapologetically. She does what she wants to do when she wants to do it. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. Um, it's she she's just an incredibly genuine person. She's unbelievably caring. Uh, and I've learned a ton from her. We grew up together, went to the same high school. She was a year ahead of me in school. I was in the same grade as her sister. I was very, very good friends with her sister. We were homecoming king and queen, and which is a funny story now because it was her sister. Um, but Meg was definitely somebody that I had my eye on. But she was like, every high school has an it girl. Meg was the it girl. So she was a professional model in New York when she was 18,
Wow.
and had signed a contract with Elite and was doing, really cool, great stuff. Um, and on the cover of magazines and all kinds of stuff. So she was like the girl that everybody paid attention to. And later in life, we luckily serendipitously bumped into each other at a gym, and the rest is history, as they say.
Wow, that's such an incredible story. See, I think that this is why I love doing this show, because so many times, right? Like if we're having conversations or we have guests on the Outlier Project, or like when I had Danella on last week, there's so many things that you want to know, but you have to make kind of the most of your time, because in that position, right? Like you're there to grow your business or all these things. I don't get to ask you all these questions, but it's so cool how one story can really shape the trajectory, right? It's so funny that you guys um grew up together. You were high school, like prom, like king and queen. That's like so cool.
Well, me and her sister were
Oh,
not
her sister.
not Meg and I.
Oh, okay.
So thank goodness I've maintained a great relationship with her sister all these years, because later on I needed her to bridge the introduction to reconnect us years later.
Yeah, that's so cool. Scott, I want to talk about something that when we're talking about the Outlier Project and living an extraordinary life, right? You and I both spend a lot of time or invest a lot of time on LinkedIn. Relationships and networking. One of the things that really stood out from our first conversation was we both had this idea of like impact, but then you started talking about how for you really value like people over everything is like one of
Yep.
your sayings that you talk about all the time. I'm really curious for you, how did that kind of mindset and idea evolve, and did it start from, I know you talked about how sports and started building relationships when you were younger was really kind of something that changed everything for you, but so many times on LinkedIn, and I talk to so many people who claim to be master expert networkers, but they look down on personalization, and usually it's because a lot of people aren't willing to invest the time or money right into people. And I'm kind of curious for you because I feel like one of the things that you hear all the time as a common saying is like be interested versus interesting. But
Mhm.
I've really kind of shifted it for me about be or invest in people instead of being interested. And I feel like there's no better person who does that kind of more than you. Talk about kind of how that's really changed the game for you with networking, building relationships, but also like was it something, how did that really start?
I think I'm just a naturally curious person, so I'm always I've always been enthralled by people that have accomplished interesting things. And it doesn't really matter what domain it is. I mean, you could be a great chef, you could be a musician, you could be an athlete, you could be a business person, you could write books, it doesn't really matter. I'm very, very interested in how they got there, and their process and how they think about the success that they've had. So I've just been really interested in that stuff. So people love to talk about those journeys. And so you've got a very receptive audience because people love to share that with you. And so I think that natural curiosity, I was able to build some really great relationships. And then I started building relationships with really influential people. And that opened up lots of opportunities and lots of doors and allowed me to really do some great things and to give back in a big way, which has been incredibly important to me my whole life. Um, so yeah, relationships are everything. People over everything is kind of a mantra that I think businesses need to always understand that people are by far your biggest asset. And at the end of the day, your success or failure as a business is predicated on the people you hire and the teams you build. But also, our lives are very much dictated by the people we surround ourselves with. So I've always sought out, it didn't matter what I was doing, I always wanted to be surrounded by people that were many, many steps ahead of me. And I still do this to this day because I like the journey. The journey to me is like there's nothing I'm shooting for. There's no destination. It's not like when my bank account looks like this, then I'm gonna call it a success. Like I love the journey. It's probably why I always thought, well, I'll make a lot of money, I'll retire early, and then I'm like, what the heck would I do? I don't want to golf every day. I really enjoy what I do. So, that might look different from what I do today, but I don't see myself ever retiring because I really enjoy the process. I enjoy the journey.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Randy, so great to see you, my friend. Yeah, if you haven't connected with Scott, you definitely have to catch the replay. And Scott, we have one of probably your biggest fans is here. Kathy, so great to see you.
I
Love.
I will just tell you that, and I could probably get emotional if I think too much about this or talk too much about it, but Kathy has been such an incredible part of my life and such an unbelievable blessing to me. Um, the support she gives me from, just from a friendship standpoint, but from a
Yeah.
business standpoint, because we worked together for all these years, is just incredible. And the admiration that I have for Kathy is hard to describe. I have tremendous, tremendous respect and admiration for her. She's one of the most incredible people I know.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved having her on the show, and just what an incredible conversation and story that she has. And another one of our outlier friends is here, Dan. So good to see you, Dan. Yeah, Kathy is. Funny story about Kathy. I remember we were on like one of our legends events or something, and Kathy was I don't know if she wasn't there, if she was running like a little late, but we were having issues like playing the intro, and Scott was like, "Oh God, where's Kathy?" And then she comes in, and I think Mike was there, so he was able to get it started. But that was just so funny, just to kind of show you like it really is the small things, right? You hear so many people, and Scott, I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on this, because I used to hear people who say this all the time, like, "Oh, don't sweat the small stuff," but I feel like it's the small things that most people don't do, or that they overlook, that makes the biggest difference, right? You and I were talking about in the pre-live about how, or I think you even talked about this today in our conversation for Top Talks, about how one of what, right? Like, do you want to be like one of millions, one of a handful, one of one? And what I'm so curious about is, how did you kind of adopt that mentality? Because I think for me, I've just always been really big on personalization, because I find that one conversation, I feel like so many people are one conversation away from a completely different life,
Right.
right? I take our conversation for example. Like, I chatted with you, and next thing I know, I'm in the Outlier Project, and I've had so many incredible connections, collaborations, really good friends that have come out of it. And it's like, that to me was a priceless gift, a priceless interaction. I'm kind of curious, like, how did you really start adopting that whole idea of one of X, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple questions in there. Number one, I'd say details matter. So sweating the small stuff, I do sweat the small stuff. I
Yeah.
know the context that people use that in. Um, so I definitely think that is really, really important. What was the second part of your question?
Just kind of, how did you adopt that mentality? Because one of the things that I see from so many people who
Of
claim,
personalization.
yeah, of personalization.
Um, I mean, I think it's just basic. It's
Mm,
you know, if you want to make somebody feel good, sending a generic, fruitcake that everybody's getting, like that's not making anybody feel really special.
yeah.
But understanding that Paul really likes this or that and tailoring something to them,
Yeah.
makes a huge difference. Very early on, when I was a chief revenue officer, We used to take people to very expensive steak dinners in New York, typically like Del Frisco's or Peter Luger's, places like that. They're crazy expensive. And, everybody that we took enjoyed them. But I have a neighbor who's a very famous author. Her name is Leslie Connor. And she had written her first book, Miss Bridie Throws a Shovel. And I remember having her sign that and write a note in it for one of our clients' kids. And, so the book cost me whatever, $14. And it took a little shoe leather to walk to her house and have her sign it. But honestly, the reaction that I got from a $14 book far exceeded the steak dinner that was, I don't know, 30 times the price.
Wow, that's
So
powerful.
it's just, you've got to care about people. You've got to care about them as individuals. And when you start to treat them like as in mass, and you just go generic, you're never going to have the impact that you want.
Right.
So the intense personalization is just unbelievably important, because I think what it says is I know you and I care about you, not I care about 1,000 people that I'm gonna send all the same stuff.
Yeah, for sure. That's really powerful too, because I mean, just take like LinkedIn for example, right? Because for me, like I only send personalized connection requests, and I always get it gets accepted. I'd say probably like 99% of the time. There's like a couple that don't work, but the response that I always get back from people is like, "Wow, like I've had my profile on LinkedIn and nobody's noticed that," and I feel like it it really is just about trying to build a connection with people, right? Because that's really what you're doing in relationships. Where I want to go next is we had talked about when we read your bio about how you're uh you're a four-time author of your Standing O series. And I had watched another podcast that you did about how that what the books like symbolize in terms of, one, you give all the money that you make from them to charity. And I was really blown away to find out how much of a military tie those books kind of have, right? Can you kind of talk about why did you decide to create the Standing O series, and what has it really meant on this journey of yours to living an extraordinary life?
Yeah. I came up with it out of desperation. So when I started my company, Something New, 9 years ago, giving back was incredibly important to me. But I had a big problem in that I knew I wasn't going to take VC money, because, again, I'm a little bit of a control freak. So I didn't want to give up any decision making. So when you're bootstrapping a company, you're pouring all the money that you make right back into the company. And so, I'm like, man, how am I going to give back? Because I can't write checks to these organizations that I really care about. And so I thought, what are my assets? And my assets were my relationships. And, so I decided to write an anthology, and this is how dumb I am. My publisher had to tell me. My publisher one day said something about an anthology. I said, "What's an anthology?" And she was like, "Well, that's what you're writing, dummy. You're putting together You're putting together like a collaboration of contributing authors." So I realized that I had 52 friends, one for each week, that would write a chapter of gratitude for a life lesson learned. And I could put those in a book. So Dick Vermeil, who's a Hall of Fame football coach, won a Super Bowl with the Rams. He wrote the foreword to the book. And Tiki Barber, who's a all-time great running back for the New York Giants, wrote the cover quote, and then 52 absolute unbelievable people wrote chapters of gratitude, and we gave all the money to charity. And then I realized I probably have another 52 friends, and that became Standing O Encore. And then I wanted to write a book that was exclusively military, so I put together a book called Standing O Salute. All the proceeds went to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, and everybody in the book has a military background. And then we put out Standing O Tribute, and Standing O Honor will come out this year.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And I think one of the things that you always joke with us about, if anybody wants the book, Kathy dropped the link, definitely go get it. One of the things that I laugh all the time about is you see how like everybody's almost an author nowadays, right? Like there's anthologies like Up the Yin Yang, everybody's a bestseller, and you kind of joke all the time with yourself that I've put out 4 books and none of them have become a bestseller.
No,
I
I'm
think
terrible at I don't know. I can't sell books to save my life.
it's so interesting though, because the thing that I love so much about everything that you do is that it's so intentional. And I know one of the things that I talked about doing as like a major goal for me was to, write my own book this year. And one of the things that I found was that I think a lot of people are getting kind of caught up on the vanity of it all, right? Like it seems like it's becoming less and less about the story and the impact that you are really creating, right? And it's become about the bestseller and the status and all these type of things. But from everything that you've done, right? Like you've built relationships with some of the most incredible people all over the world. You've won like so many incredible awards that we would. I'm really curious about one of them, so we'll talk about that later. But character is something that is always at the forefront of everything that you do, and you're really big on integrity, authenticity, right? Being genuine, intention. What would you kind of say to a lot of the people who are like in that position, right? They're caught up on like, oh, my book needs to be a bestseller. And the reason why I asked that question is because that was something for me that I really had to overcome this year, right? It got a little intimidating, being
Right.
surrounded by people who were New York Times bestsellers, Wall Street Journal bestselling authors, and them telling you like the title alone of the book that I was writing was worthy of being a bestseller. And I feel like not even in just this aspect of books or relationships or all these things, it seems like the intention and the reason for doing things has kind of shifted from a genuine perspective to more of like a vanity, right? Do it for the social media and all these type of things. What are kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, nobody's going to give a shit at the end of the day, Paul, about how many books I wrote. They're not going to care about the house I live in. They're not going to care about the cars I drive. They're not going to care even about the businesses I built. They're only going to care about the impact that I made. That's it.
Yeah.
So nobody's going to care about that stuff. So whether my books were bestsellers or whether they weren't, I'm doing it for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that I'm a best-selling author, because I'm not. And I don't really care about that. I care about, am I able to shine a big spotlight on a charity that I care about? Am I able to contribute a little bit of money towards a charity that I care about? That's important to me. Character, and we talked about it before the show started, is incredibly important. Like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. If you want me to show up a half an hour early, I'm not going to be a minute late. Like, I'm showing up a half hour early. It's important to me, because those are all things I can control. There's a lot of things in life I can't control.
Yep.
But that's, you know, it's such an important aspect of life. You know, it's said over and over, but control the controllables.
Yep.
Um, that's all you can do, because you know things are going to happen that are out of our control. You know, we're going to have a pandemic. We're going to have
Yeah.
economic chaos. We're going to have all kinds of stuff that I can't really control any of that stuff, but I can definitely control my character and, you know, whether I live a life that I'll be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that really kind of sums up the topic really, right? Of being an outlier and living an extraordinary life. I'm curious because one of the things that kind of blew my mind was I didn't even know that there was an American Business Award for innovation, and yet alone that you're one of one in that category of have um, winning it 8 consecutive times in a row. Talk to me kind of a little bit about one, like what does that really mean to you? Because I know we talked about like, you know, a lot of these things really don't, but in terms of like legacy, like that's something that is going to put you, you know, you're one of one, right? Like in that sector. But how has innovation really impacted kind of not just your journey as an entrepreneur, but been played a pivotal role in this idea of living an extraordinary life?
I mean, you can't be an outlier and not be innovative. I think of innovation as creativity. And, you know, when I started my company, uh, I really started it because I thought that the talent space was really antiquated, um, and really needed a facelift. And I was very confident that I could build a better mousetrap. And building that better mousetrap has led to all those awards, and having a great team. You know, certainly helps us to do that. Um, I don't really care about, again, nobody's going to remember those awards. You know, they're not Grammys, they're not Oscars. They're cool, and I'm proud of our team, and I'm proud of what we built. Um, but I love doing things differently. And
Mm,
if the thundering herd is going left, you can almost guarantee I'm going to go right. Like I just don't want to do anything that everyone's doing. To
yeah,
me, it's just a very boring way to live.
right.
Um, I want to be an outlier. I want to do different
Mm,
things. Um, and so it almost forces you to be innovative because I think like, well, how does everybody do this?
yeah,
And then once you figure out how everyone does it, you just say, how can I do it so differently that it doesn't even resemble the same thing? And oftentimes that's where the answer is. And
yeah.
I would say any success that I've had in business has been because I've been a contrarian, because I've done
Mm,
things very, very differently. Um, you know, we're a company, something new that's 9 years old, and we've never made a cold call, and we've never sent out any mass emails. So
wow.
that's unheard of.
Yeah,
But we've been able to do it, for a number of reasons. Part of it is a presence that we have on social media,
right.
but I'd rather do unique things. So gifting to me is kind of something I really enjoy. And so we use that as, you know, partially as a business development tool. Um, but we just want to show up differently. I mean, it's in literally, we have these things. It sits here on my desk. I look at it every day. It's called
Yep.
We Believe. So these are the things that we believe as outliers, and one of them is to show up differently.
Yeah.
I don't want to show up like everybody else. That's boring. That to me leads to an ordinary life. And I don't want to
Mm,
sleepwalk through life. I don't want to live in an ordinary
yeah.
life. I want to live my version of an extraordinary life.
Yeah, that was so powerful because that I remember that was a kind of the end of our first conversation that we had. I talked about how my favorite poem was by Robert Frost, and the idea of the I have taken the road less traveled my entire life, and it's made all the difference. And I feel
Yep.
like that was one of the reasons why I really kind of clicked with everything that you said, because even the way that I go about LinkedIn, right? And I think that I saw this a lot in my finance career, but so many times, especially on social media, there's so many people who are gurus, experts, all these type of things. And I've actually had the privilege for the past couple of years to train with a lot of them who not only have the professional credentials, but I mean, they live the lifestyle. And it's not for show and social media. Like, they genuinely live it. And I found that everything that I've learned through training and being around them is completely different to what a lot of these like gurus and experts and all these things would tell you. We take personalization, for example. There's a lot of people who are experts on LinkedIn who would tell you, no, don't send the personalized invite. But through like Scott and I, like so many people aren't doing it, right? And I feel like that was such a powerful piece. I guess we have to talk about it, right? I've shared so much about the Outlier Project and what it's kind of meant to me. Can you talk about, one, how did you create the Outlier Project? Because I know it's gone through different iterations,
Yep.
and how were you able to create I would say assemble like some of the most incredible people all over the world across pretty much every industry, right? I mean, I think in 8 months since I've been a part of it, we've had special forces members, athletes, authors, coaches, speakers, and some of the top people in the world. Talk to me about how kind of the Outlier Project started and what it's really meant to you, because I know in many ways you have kind of said that it's kind of like your baby in a way, right? Like the
Yeah.
Outlier Project is something that's so sacred to you. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it started at the end of 2020. Meg and I were going a little stir crazy because of COVID, and we decided to take a road trip. And we just randomly said, where have we never been that we've heard a lot of great things about? And we picked Charleston, South Carolina, which I absolutely loved. But going there in August was really dumb because it was about 120 degrees and about 100% humidity. It was insane.
Oh, geez.
Um, but it was like let's call it a 14-hour drive. On the drive back, I was talking to Meg about the fact that I really love my company, but I wanted to do something that was a little bit more scalable in terms of
Mm,
ability to impact people and the
yeah.
ability to give back. And I thought, that a community was very scalable. So I originally named it the Talent Champions Council because I really wanted it to align with my company, something new.
Mm,
And what happened was, as we launched it and it started to gain traction, I realized that a lot of the people that I wanted to give people exposure to really had nothing to do with the talent strategy world. And
mm,
so I remember I wanted to bring a friend of mine on, Brandy Chastain. So Brandy is a two-time World Cup champ, two-time Olympic gold medalist. She's in the
yeah.
Soccer Hall of Fame and probably scored the most iconic goal in women's soccer history. And I'm like, what the heck does Brandy have to do with talent? Nothing. Talent acquisition, nothing. So I said, oh, Brandy, let's come on and we'll talk about teamwork or something. And I realized, what am I doing? I'm really kind of manipulating these people that I really like and have friendships with to kind of fit this model that didn't really work. And Meg and I were on vacation, and it just hit me. I'm like, what do I love? I love outliers. I view myself as an outlier. All these friends that I have, I consider them outliers. I'm going to just rebrand, and we're going to call this the Outlier Project. And I literally called Kathy from vacation and said, Kathy, we're going to completely rebrand, which meant new website, new LinkedIn homepage, new everything. And, you know, we got it done incredibly fast, thanks to Kathy. And it became the Outlier Project, and really, you know, has grown into, I just think, the most amazing community, not because of me, but because of the hundreds and hundreds of people that we have, including yourself, that make up this community. And our belief that anybody can be ordinary, but we really all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. And I think for me, that really is, you know, as I became friends with these different people, athletes and people in special forces and business leaders, I would ask the business leaders, were there people that were smarter than you? Mm-hmm. And I would ask the athletes, were there people that were more athletically gifted than you? And I would ask the special forces people, were there people that were tougher than you? And the answer was always yes. And I'm like, well, how did you become an Olympic gold medalist, a Navy SEAL, a CEO of a $1 billion company? And I realized it's because of the choices they made, and it's because of the people that they surrounded themselves with.
Yeah.
And what an incredible thing to understand that living an extraordinary life, we can choose that. Like, we don't have to be born into wealth. We don't have to be born athletically gifted. We don't have to be born with the highest IQ. If we choose to surround ourselves with extraordinary people and we make the right choices in life, anybody can live an extraordinary life. That's exciting to me. Man, we all have this incredible opportunity to make that dash between the dates meaningful. We don't have to sleepwalk through life. If we make the right choices, we can all live our version of an extraordinary life. And that's cool and that's powerful. And, you know, that's why I love this community so much.
Yeah. And it's been, I think the biggest thing to me that has really blown me away about the community is the vulnerability and transparency. I remember there was a conversation with Dr. Carol Kaufman, who's been a professor at Harvard for like 30 plus years, probably one of the most brilliant people that I've ever come across. And she used the word "I don't know" more than anybody I think that I've ever met. And I was blown away by that. And I realized that so many times in the professional world, people are taught like, oh, if you tell people that you don't know, it means like you don't know, and or that you're like not credible. But what I feel like what it really did for everybody there was, it was like, hey, you know, she's just being like honest and transparent. And that's what really opens up like relationships and conversations, is when you're willing to be real with people. Right? Because so many times, like I tell myself this all the time when I'm on social media, it's like, well, people can do whatever they want. Like I've had so many people tell me things on social media and I'm still waiting to see the action, right? As Ben Newman, another guest, says, like, you can say whatever you want, but I'm going to have a conversation with your action. And I feel like that was probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. But this community has been an absolute game changer for me. And I'm just so grateful for it. You know, I tell Scott all the time, the price that he charges to be a part of it is honestly, quite frankly, pennies on the dollar compared to the value that it is on it. And I'm just so grateful that I was introduced to it. Scott, I want to ask you probably like my favorite question that I normally don't get to ask because it's such a personal question, but personal development has been a massive part of your life. Right? I feel like you probably love growing just as much as I do. Who has been the most impactful mentor in your life? And if you have multiple, that's fine too. But what was the most valuable lesson that they've taught you?
The first is my uncle Ray, who's no longer with us, but he's probably the person I admire the most of anyone I've ever met in my life. He had incredible humility. He was brilliant. He knew something about everything, um, but he was caring, compassionate, hard worker, dedicated, just a phenomenal human being. So, you know, my Uncle Ray is definitely my hero.
Mm,
Um, and I get that, nobody knows him. Um, but he was a remarkable human being and taught me, so much. It was when he passed away. I was a senior in high school, and when we were cleaning out his house, he had a huge box filled with all the paper, cut out paper articles about, football and baseball stuff.
yeah.
And I know he was so proud of, the things that I had accomplished. Um, in terms of like professionally and somebody that people know, I would say Jesse Itzler. Um, Jesse is just an amazing person. I have so much respect for him, the way he lives his life, the authenticity that he lives his life with. And a lot of people may say, well, yeah, he's a billionaire. Jesse was like that. I know people that work with Jesse when he started Marquis Jet. A good friend of mine, Randy Brandoff, was his chief marketing officer. And so they know Jesse before Jesse had money. Jesse's always been the same person. He just lives his life with incredible authenticity. Um, and he's somebody that I have just tremendous, tremendous admiration for. He's a relationship guy too. He really, really values his friends.
Yeah.
And he's an incredible husband. He's an incredible dad. He's an unbelievably loyal friend. Um, I haven't asked Jesse for much over the course of our friendship, but every single time the answer is immediately yes. Will you write a chapter in my first book? Absolutely. Will you write the cover quote for my second? Absolutely. Will you be, he was one of our first legends before we even called it the Legend series. It was absolutely no
Yeah.
hesitation. So he's just a great, great, great human being.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's interesting because I talk all the time about how my aunt for me is really a unicorn, and it's so cool that I get to spend time with her. But Danelle had said that last week as well, that her grandpa was her, hero. But then she talked about Richard Branson. And the reason why I love asking that question is the way that people answer it. When you look at those people and you look at the way that you live your life, it's so similar to how Jesse Itzler lives. Like, you are like 100% you all the time. You do a lot of like similar things that he does, in terms of relationships and all these things. So, Scott, I want to say thank you so much for being here. 2023, every year is always different. This has definitely for me been one of the most memorable years. of my life, and meeting you was a big reason why that this has been the most memorable year. I'm so grateful for your mentorship, your friendship, everything that you've done for me, our conversations. I'm so grateful and honored to have you as a friend, a mentor, and just to have come across you on my journey. This has been an incredible episode for me. Before we go, I'm gonna hand it back to you about any final words or anything that you want to share. I know you're probably not going to promote, but you do have permission to do that. So I'm gonna give you the full screen.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, I just appreciate the opportunity to share some time with you. Um, I think the sky's the limit for you, and it's going to be exciting to see what you do. You're already doing things at a very young age that other people aren't doing, and the compounding effect of doing those things early are going to pay off. It's just like, putting your money in a 401k when you're 25 versus 45. The net effect is dramatically different. And I'm just excited. I'm excited to see your journey. I'm excited to see everybody in our community grow and move closer to whatever their version of an extraordinary life is. And I just appreciate you giving me this forum tonight to talk. And if it helps somebody, if it makes an impact on somebody, then this was really time well spent. But I just want to say thank you because you gave me the opportunity and the platform to talk about these things.
Oh, absolutely, Scott. It's been such a pleasure having you here. And I want to say thank you so much to everybody who showed up: Tim, Dan, Dr. New, so many incredible people in the audience. This has been an incredible 2023, and no better person that I got to close it out on top. Happy New Year, everyone. This has been such an incredible gift. Scott, thank you so much for being here. Have an amazing Happy New Year, everyone, and we will see you